It's going to be one Action Jackson. So, action. Take one. Now, I'm going to compare Dwight D. Eisenhower's liberalism to Bernie Sanders' socialism. First, I wonder when people defend all these private health care insurance, it's just like the Republicans and their guns, right? So CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, John Delaney, Joe Biden, the Republicans, they're only going to let go of their private health care insurance out of their cold, dead hands. We love our premiums and our deductibles. We love our private health insurance companies. How are they going to eat? You know, what about their health? Does anybody care about the private health care insurance industry's health of their workers? So, this is to answer the question, how leftist, socialist, communist is Bernie Sanders? Ultimately, when it comes to the spectrum of, you know, far left and far right, so far right, you got Benito Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, Hideki Tojo. We don't talk about Hideki Tojo enough. Hideki Tojo is the one that bombed us on Pearl Harbor, and yet Hitler gets all the credit. So Hideki Tojo, Benito Mussolini, the fascist, and Hitler, the Nazi. So Bernie Sanders is to the left of all these right-wing guys, right? They're right-wing. So Bernie Sanders is to the left of all these far left-wing people such as Joe Stalin, Che Guevara, Mao Zedong. And then I think about Christopher Columbus, Genghis Khan, Hernando de Soto, Francisco Pizarro. Bernie Sanders would be to the left of them because he's not an imperialist. And I'm not for sure if they're conservative or liberal, but on foreign policy, Bernie Sanders would be to the left of Genghis Khan. So where exactly, I mean, that doesn't clarify anything, does it? So Bernie isn't totally right-wing and Bernie isn't totally left-wing. I've heard New Deal Democrat and I've heard a capitalist socialist. So he's been a mixed capitalist socialist the whole time. And when it comes to Dwight D. Eisenhower, I believe he's to the right of Eisenhower, and he may be more lined up with FDR. He might be to the right of FDR. So Bernie is to the left of Eisenhower, but to the right of FDR, or maybe Henry Wallace, his vice president. Bernie is to the right. So he's more conservative than all the Green Party candidates, Ralph Nader, Jill Stein, Cynthia McKinney, and probably most of the socialist nations. He's only talking about health care, right? Some of these socialist nations, Sweden and Norway, they got so many social programs, it's not even funny. So I'm just going to compare him to Eisenhower, okay? So I believe he's to the left of Eisenhower, but to the right of FDR. So that's essentially where he's situated, in between our presidents, which would make him a moderating voice. He's to a right, you know, to the right of a Democrat, but to the left of a Republican. So, okay, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, Dwight D. Eisenhower, I will adopt Dwight D. Eisenhower into the left because compared to where our, you know, conversation is today, let's just take a quick look at this list here, okay? So, the 1956 Republican Party platform. He wanted to give assistance to low-income communities. What? He cares about the poor? What kind of Christian is this? What kind of Christian? This is not the Christian Republicans. Care about the poor? Free money to low-income communities. Protect Social Security? More free money. Look at all these just government, you know, welfare states, you know, programs. When it comes to refugees, he was in favor of asylum. We got a president that's dismantling all asylum. So he's opposed to all immigration, including people who, you know, have a right, who have, you know, they're running away from persecution. So like Bernie Sanders' family, they ran away from the Nazis. Only his father and his uncle lived. Bernie Sanders' family was exterminated in Poland. After his father and uncle left, the Nazis came in and killed everybody. So Bernie Sanders is, you know, in alignment with the providing asylum to refugees. He's not for decriminalizing the border crossings, but he is in favor of providing asylum to refugees. He says asylum is not a crime. So that's Bernie Sanders, protected Social Security. Bernie Sanders, assist in low-income communities. Bernie Sanders, extend minimum wage. So Dwight D. Eisenhower wanted to extend the minimum wage, and he did. It went from 75 cents to $1. So he wanted to raise minimum wage to $1. I bet you there's, what, $1? What the hell? Oh my God, we've lost our pure laissez-faire, capitalistic, casino-style, you know, fucking dog-eat-dog cage match. Then improve unemployment benefits to cover more people, strengthen labor laws so workers can join unions, and equal pay regardless of sex. So we passed equal pay for equal sex so many times. We've got like about 100 laws equal pay for equal sex. Is it not taking? Because people keep quoting, you know, that 75 cents on the dollar bullshit. But I feel like if there was a woman who was making 75 cents on the dollar, we would hear about it. At least a lot more, because I don't hear about it that often. So, yeah, this is the 1956 Republican Party platform, equal pay regardless of sex, strengthen labor laws so workers can join unions. A Republican who's in favor of unions, they're all about, you know, right to work now, so the right to bust unions, the right to kill contracts, extend the minimum wage, provide asylum to refugees, protect Social Security and assistance to low-income communities. So that's a little short list right there. So the biggest comparison, this was a Bernie Sanders comparison, when it comes to Dwight D. Eisenhower, Bernie Sanders said that his marginal tax rate, because they said, how high are you going to raise taxes? He says, I'm not going to raise it up to Eisenhower's level. Well, Eisenhower had a 91% marginal tax rate. It was 92% when he came into power in 1952, 53, but it was, you know, dropped by 1%, okay? So Eisenhower cut the Democrat Truman's marginal tax rate by 1%. Bernie Sanders said that his marginal tax rate won't be 91%, so it's going to be less than 91%. Right now it's 37%. Barack Obama is 40%, so somewhere between 37% and 91%. That's where Bernie Sanders' tax rate's going to be, between 37% and 91%, because that was Eisenhower, and the marginal tax rate, it only applied to people that made an annual income over $200,000 and couples who made $400,000 or more in the 1950s. So that's about $1.7 million for individuals and $3.4 million for couples. So you're making more than $1.7 million, you're going to have a marginal tax rate of 91%. So 2015, the marginal tax rate was 40%. For individuals making over $413,200 and couples making $464,200 bucks. So essentially, if you're making over $400,000, right, you'll get hit with the top marginal tax rate of 37% today. So, you know, okay, so he's going to be less than the Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower's tax rate. Does that make the Republicans, do they calm down? Are you calm down now, Republicans? He's just going to be like Eisenhower, right? Eisenhower he said some stupid things when it comes to civil rights, and then he also was the one that made communism illegal. He passed a law outlawing the Communist Party. It was basically in name only. There was, you know, freedom of speech or whatever, but essentially he passed a law, and it was just, you know, if you read it, it's like really strong, saying that this person and that person will be accused, but then they said, you know, freedom of speech, so therefore it was just kind of, anyways, he passed a law, you know, making the Communist Party illegal, outlawing the Communist Party, essentially. I guess maybe it's a royal proclamation that he wanted to have happen. Regardless, he's the anti-communist. He passed an anti-communist law. So he hated communism. He fought against, you know, the Nazis. And so he's this World War II hero. He actually a little bit of information about Eisenhower before we get into more of his policies, but he's, you know, very liberal compared to today's Republicans. He called himself a moderate Republican, and so he was a moderate Republican, and he called himself something specifically like a modern Republican. So his modern Republicanism is between the liberals and conservatives. So he was right in between, you know, where the liberals and conservatives of his day was. Okay, so some interesting things. He actually, let's see here. He said he's the 34th U.S. president. He served 2 terms from 1952. He gets elected 53 to 1961, so he's right before JFK, right after FDR and Truman. And then so the 1950s is the decade of Dwight D. Eisenhower from 1953 to 61, so only, the first couple years in the 50s. So the 1950s would be, it's kind of picturesque. There was, World War II, we just defeated the Nazis and we controlled most, 50% of the world. And then we were showing the world how capitalism works and how capitalism can succeed. So Dwight D. Eisenhower is a moderate Republican. In fact, he was skeptical of massive centralized federal government, but he acknowledged that to attain any success it is quite clear that the federal government cannot avoid or escape responsibilities which the mass of the people firmly believe should be undertaken by it. So when all of America says we want universal health care, universal college, universal basic income, when all of America loves these programs, Eisenhower found it hard to say, no, you can't have these programs. The way he defined himself, he said he wasn't a Republican or a Democrat, up until he ran for president. Both Republicans and Democrats tried to court Eisenhower to, be a part of their party. He was just a successful general, so he's very popular because, he did D-Day, right? He's the one that says, all right, let's do D-Day. And then we wind up, beating the Nazis and win World War II. So his modern republicanism, the way he says it, is that he's conservative with taxes, but liberal with human beings. He's conservative with taxes, liberal with human beings. So, whatever that means, but essentially it sounds like he's saying a slim, efficient government, but also give a shit about the people when it comes to the poor people and the old people and the disabled, Social Security and the refugees. So give a shit about people, but save money. So, that's genius. That's what I believe. So me and Eisenhower, we're, right there in the middle of the road. So Eisenhower is, he's a liberal, right? He's liberal in a lot of stuff, okay? So let's talk about everything that he's liberal in. So this is on Eisenhower's liberalism. One last point about the parties. He wasn't Republican or Democrat. He was more for national unity and stability over party politics. He just wanted the country to run well. And he wanted all of us to be Americans and all of us to... So even though he talked bad about civil rights, he's actually going to, enforce civil rights. He's going to send the airborne, some air... cover some military people to Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas. So these are Bernie Sanders and Dwight D. Eisenhower policies. They both agree that New Deal programs, expanded Social Security, prioritizing, making it a priority to balance the budget over tax cuts, federal assistance to low-income communities, supported Republican-backed rural development program which helped tenant farmers and low-income farm families. Bernie Sanders has a massive farmer package for current farmers and for people that want to become farmers. So when it comes to farming, Bernie Sanders is going to do a shit ton for farmers. He's going to do a bunch. If you're a farmer and you don't vote for Bernie Sanders, it's because you don't give a shit about other farmers and other people, and you're stupid and you're dumb. So he's going to do a shit ton for not big corporate conglomerate farms, but for small individual and family farms. Bernie Sanders, he's Eisenhower, right? So when it comes to farms, when it comes to, that's the federal assistance to low-income communities. When it comes to expanding Social Security, when it comes to having a balanced budget, that's more important than tax cuts. This is Eisenhower and Bernie Sanders agree. 17 million more Americans were put on Social Security. $10 million is added to the program in 1954. Bernie Sanders wants to expand Social Security. Dwight D. Eisenhower is for the Refugees Relief Act for asylum for thousands of refugees, including from communist countries in the Eastern Bloc of Europe. So this anti-communist, you got all these communist refugees, but he still, welcomed them with wide open arms. Bernie Sanders is for refugees to have asylum. His father and uncle. 2 million workers got higher minimum wage. This is 1955. 75 cents was raised to $1. Oh my God, I bet the fucking Republicans shit themselves. What? We're going to pay those bastards, those poor damn workers, $1 an hour? From 75 cents? That's socialism. You're going to raise minimum wage up a quarter? That's socialism. So that's 1955. The 1956 platform wanted to add 4 million more workers onto the unemployment insurance system. On unions, Eisenhower's plank was protect the right of workers to organize into unions and to bargain collectively. And that was the firm and permanent policy of the Eisenhower administration. So with all these right-to-work assholes, he's saying the right to workers, the right for workers to unionize and to collectively bargain is the firm and permanent policy. You can't get more unequivocal than that. That's a very good promise, right? So he was for labor unions and their right to unionize and to collectively bargain. He was for equal pay for equal work. This is the 1950s, right? Obama passed something. Jared Polis passed equal pay for equal. And then 63 there was something. The Equal Rights Amendment got killed, but we've been passing equal rights, equal pay for equal rights since the 1950s. Okay, so that's, equal pay for equal work. That's exactly, gender shouldn't matter. So that's Bernie Sanders' position. That's Eisenhower's position. Eisenhower is going to promote the free use of the polio vaccine. Free medicine? Oh, that's socialized vaccinations. That's social, they're trying to get rid of polio, but that's socialism. Free vaccines? No, you need to get a job and you need to save up for the entire year to possibly get the vaccine. God. He created the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare department, so health, education, and welfare. Eisenhower is going to build the biggest public works project in American history, probably the biggest infrastructure project, too, in American history inside the United States. So the Eisenhower interstate system, we call our interstate highway system the Eisenhower interstate system because he's the one that put what would be $500 billion in today's money into the Federal Aid Highway Act. In 1956, he passes the Federal Aid Highway Act. Eisenhower was inspired by Hitler's Autobahn. So for military reasons, right, to get your convoy from Arkansas to Washington, there was a military thing, but, think about what this country would be like without the interstate system. The interstate system is, good for travel, for tourism, for people who want to relocate. So that's Eisenhower. Eisenhower built the interstate highway system, a massive infrastructure plan for the United States. That's socialism, right? $500 billion, that's massive socialism. My God, every time you get on the interstate system, you should be like, God, I hate this damn socialism. Look at all this socialism. Our country's just going to hell in a handbasket. Now, the interstate has actually been helping people, even still today. 70 years later, the shit that Eisenhower did. So he's building, public schools. He's building roads and bridges in the interstate system. And he's, expanding Social Security. He's expanding, the unemployment insurance system. He's expanding the minimum wage. He's increasing minimum wage, and he's helping refugees get asylum for thousands of refugees, even from these, horrible communist countries, so you might get some communist citizens. Oh, my God. But Eisenhower is not a bigot. He's just a quiet person who wanted to run the country quietly, ran under the Republican ticket, beat Truman, and now he's the president of the 1950s. Eisenhower is going to be so liberal that he's going to fight with liberals because they want to just spend and spend, but then the Republicans wanted to kill these social programs. So in 1955, the conservative Congress is going to reject Eisenhower's request for more money for public school construction in poor areas. There's probably about 10 schools that was built in Pueblo, Colorado during the 1950s. So he's building public schools, roads, bridges, interstate systems. So, but the conservative Republicans in Congress didn't like that. 1955, they rejected. No, you can't do that. 1958, you're going to have the National Defense Education Act, which is offering low-cost loans to students studying math, science, and language. So this is a massive redistribution. This is socialism again. Low-cost loans, so the government is going to loan to students who want to better themselves in math, science, and language at a low, interest rate. What the hell is the U.S. government doing? Well, back then, Eisenhower was afraid of Russia. In October 1957, Russia was supposed to be, the Soviets were these backwards peasants and didn't know shit. America was capitalistic and we were driving cars and we just had our shit together. So when the Russians had launched Sputnik, they're the first people out in outer space. So they were the first people to go out into outer space, to go out into the atmosphere or out of the atmosphere or some shit. But that scared the shit out of America because, damn, their technology is better than ours. They're able to go farther out of, Earth than what we could. So that scared Americans. That scared Eisenhower. So he's going to, try to increase more students studying math, science, and language, with the National Defense Education Act of 1958. Eisenhower was opposed to dropping the bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. When it comes to those bombs, he's like, we didn't have to drop it on those people. So Harry Truman, a Democrat, right? FDR is World War II, so, Harry Truman's going to drop the bomb. Harry Truman is the only person in the entire world who's dropped the bomb. So there's only been 2 nuclear bombs dropped, but we could wipe out, the entire world. So we didn't have to kill those people. Eisenhower was opposed to it, rightfully, and then Truman was, in favor of it. We could have done something else. But Eisenhower also warned us about the military-industrial complex in his farewell address. America, watch out for this armaments industry. They're going to, keep on pushing us into war, and we're going to get into these wars so they can make money, but that's not good for the people. So even though Eisenhower was like the boring center for the 1950s, was getting turbulent, it's not the 60s, but it's the precursor, right? So Eisenhower was a boring center that held this nation together, kept us in national unity, had a moderate stance between the liberals and the conservatives. So therefore, in today's parlance, he's, a fucking Democrat, socialist, communist. He's Mao Zedong. He's so far to the left, he's an Elizabeth Warren. He's a Bernie Sanders. Well, he probably is more of an Elizabeth Warren because she's a capitalist, right? So she doesn't like, socialism and communism, whereas Bernie calls himself a socialism. So Eisenhower's liberalism aligns much more with Bernie's socialism than the Republicans of today, but Bernie is probably to the right, because not only does Bernie, I was thinking the war on drugs, he wants universal health care, universal college, and the war on drugs. So Eisenhower's all in the, education. He passes the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, so he cares about the health of the people. But I believe that FDR said that we should have universal health care and we should have a lot of stuff when it comes to unions and working class people. So he's probably more aligned with FDR. But he's, to the left of all Mao and Stalin and Che and Castro. So he's to the right. He's more conservative than all those far left-wing folks. So he's not absurdly out of this world, crazily. That's what they're trying to paint him up as. My God, he is so far left. He's a socialist. While that's, not true, what the Republicans have handed the Democrats a gift, because we could go as far left as we possibly want to. They say, just raising your hand is socialism. They'll look at a butterfly. Is this socialism? They don't know what the fuck socialism is. Socialism is the working people control the means of production, so it's not just government spending. That's sort of the Mitch McConnell definition. So when we actually get down to the nitty-gritty, and if we really want to start talking to each other, we do need to define these terms precisely. So that way, we're on the same page. Now, Eisenhower, he's not perfect, right? Eisenhower couldn't believe that Truman increased the military budget in his final year in office by 300%. So he's sitting there criticizing Truman for being this, tax and spend imperialist. He's warning the American people about the military-industrial complex. He's opposed to dropping the bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So he's, liberal in those instances, but he was for very much an expansionist foreign policy. We're going to get into the Vietnam War. Eisenhower's going to escalate the Vietnam War. Truman started it. Eisenhower's going to escalate it, and then it's going to get worse and worse. So I think about all those 20 shadow wars in Africa. Truman started it with just a couple military advisors. We just got a couple people in any of the, the 20 different nations in Africa for now. But it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and then, a bunch of American soldiers are going to be killed. American people won't know what's up, and they'll be outraged, but would it be legitimate, right? If we're in a country where they didn't want us to be in a country, or, where we're actually fighting against, the bad guys and the terrorists. So I think just a gut reaction would be like, oh my God, we need to defend ourselves. But I think that a better analysis would be, should we have been there in the first place? Because that's 20 Vietnams we're starting in Africa. That's 20 more Vietnams. The way Truman started the Vietnam War, that's how Donald Trump is starting the shadow wars in Africa. How much? 6 more minutes. Woo! All right, I kicked this one's ass too. So, Dwight D. Eisenhower is conservative on civil rights. The 1954 Brown versus Board of Education is going to pass during his regime, during his tenure. Eisenhower was pissed off because he appointed Earl Warren, and then Earl Warren, the liberal, says that we're supposed to be integrated and not a segregated apartheid society. And Eisenhower said, damn it, why did I appoint Earl Warren? That's the biggest damned mistake I ever made after the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education. said some racist shit. Truman went ahead and integrated the military, but American society, public school systems, and restaurants, this was still segregated, and it's going to stay segregated up until 1960s, 1964 Civil Rights Act, and busing. Right? So the 50s, the predominant 50s, when I think about it being sort of, it's the Leave It to Beaver, it's Pleasantville. So it was very good, people could get a factory job, and they, college was cheap, and they can essentially do really well with just, a little bit, and get themselves a house, get themselves a car, and have themselves a nice middle-class existence. For white people, it's still segregation, it's still lynching, still hate strikes, race riots, still all that, racist horseshit still going. The military was integrated, but not America. So his rights, his records on civil rights is suspect. He didn't say, let's get some civil rights to the black folks, but he did enforce the 1954 decision. When it came to Little Rock 9, little girl going to school, and then the other kids going to school, he's going to send the 101st Airborne. So he's going to enforce the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education, which he didn't have to. If he didn't, desegregation could have died right then and there. So he actually, took another step forward towards civil rights. Eisenhower outlawed the Communist Party, in name only, not form, but still, if you read the bill, it's very, very strong. I think it says, conspiring or doing this and that, if you're doing... So his foreign policy is the only thing that I'm really... kind of stuck on, because he's going to let the CIA run amok. They're going to overthrow Iran. There's going to be a 1953 coup d'etat against Iran. That's going to put the Shah in the power. And then his CIA dreamed up the Bay of Pigs, so that's going to happen under JFK. So he, teased JFK up for, horrible disaster. He's going to increase the Vietnam War and the Korean War against the Soviet Union. Why do I keep hearing this? It's ending, okay? It's 3 minutes, but it's like, oh my God, is it ending? Is it not ending? And then the last thing, so he's, allowing essentially the CIA to, spread their wings wherever the fuck they spread their wings up during his tenure. We own 50% of the world, and we're overthrowing Iran. The Bay of Pigs is going to be a disaster. We're in Korea and Vietnam. We wiped out, 60-70% of Korea is going to get wiped out by Dwight D. Eisenhower. So the Korean War, I don't know if he started it or escalated or what the fuck happened there, but we're still in the Korean War today. That's why when Donald Trump crossed the demilitarized line, that was historic, because we only had a ceasefire. We never had a peace treaty. We never said, okay, the war has ended. So the war is still going on. We just have a ceasefire right now for, 60 years. And that's why there's South and North Korea. So North Korea is the portion that the Koreans were able to say for themselves. South Korea is our colony. That's essentially what we occupied, and we got military bases, and they're our allies now, so that's essentially their own nation. But the Korean War wiped out 70%, like it was a fucking crazy, 60 to 70% of all the Koreans were killed. So millions of Koreans, 4 million are going to get killed in Vietnam. So these are, policies that Eisenhower had in place that got worse and worse and worse. So, he's not terrible. That's, only on his foreign policy, and only Jimmy Carter can claim that he never fired a shot. The U.S. military never fired a bullet under Jimmy Carter. So that was a Pax Americana. We had world peace. We weren't even shooting bullets, at people. So that's a remarkable, so remarkable. Now, Nixon was the last liberal president. I'm going to compare Bernie Sanders to Nixon's liberalism. But when it comes to Eisenhower, Eisenhower is definitely closer to Bernie Sanders than he is to the Democrats and Republicans. So he's definitely more liberal. So I don't know if the Republicans would still claim him or not. But he was smart. He was intelligent. He ran a boring administration compared to this shit show. I want boring. I want boring and stability and strong. And Nixon... Okay, that's actually, I guess that'd be the last thing. He picked Nixon as his vice president, so he's going to give us Nixon, but Nixon had some liberal ideas too. So, we have these liberal Republicans, and then the Democrats just become Republicans, and we don't have liberals anymore. We haven't had, a liberal president since Nixon. But Nixon said that Dwight D. Eisenhower was actually much more shrewd and calculated and complex and devious than what other people had thought. I remember when he went ahead and took, the presidency, the very first words out of his mouth with the first speech, his inaugural address to the nation, he says, let's bow our heads. He made everybody pray. So we're going to be Christians. We're going to be good, wholehearted Christians. Let's pray, that what the hell I'm about to do with this country turns out to be okay. Come on, America. So he was, when it comes to, essentially, Dwight D. Eisenhower is, a white male. He's a military hero. He's against, all this government spending, and so he's, kind of a racist when it comes to civil rights.